The Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Hey, good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. I've got two folks in here that I invited actually because of a letter that was written in Pacific Daily News and Voice of the People a couple Sundays ago regarding the military buildup, and the title is Guam Needs Leadership on the Buildup. I have in studio this evening, I have Victoria, Lola Leon Guerrero. Likewise, I've got Dr. Michael Lujan Bevacua, both instructors at the University of Guam. So no petty resumes here. Anyway, welcome to the show. Let's just start off. The letter that you guys jointly wrote about the military buildup basically is calling for more transparency, calling for more detail on again. The Parahita Todo movement. Now, I know you guys are members of We Are Guahan, but you don't necessarily represent the views that you're going to be talking about tonight are not necessarily views of We Are Guahan, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're not. We Are Guahan is a very diverse group of many perspectives, and really the role We Are Guahan has played largely in the community is to educate people about the facts surrounding the buildup, And while that is what we do call for in the editorial that we wrote, is basically what we're saying is it's been a positive thing that our community has wanted to know more. When this buildup was first announced in 2006, at the scoping meetings and with all the information that was coming out from DOD, there weren't very many specifics. And then all of a sudden, when the DEIS came out, our community was overloaded with information about very serious ways that the buildup would change our lives.
And deadlines to when to submit responses.
Exactly. And so suddenly in the past month, we saw this major sort of shift in, well, it wasn't really a shift because for a long time the buildup was presented as simply an economic boom for the island. And there wasn't much to question because we didn't have the information. But what was really incredible for our community is that once the information was made available, that we would have at a certain point in the buildup as much as 80,000 more people in our community. We would lose sites like Paget, Apra Harbor. Our fresh water would be affected. Our social services and public services would be strained. These were all major concerns. And so our community responded, and I think that what we were trying to say is that as educators, that's a really important thing to do. It means it's a sign of a healthy, mature community if we're willing to look at something and say, wait a minute, this is going to affect our lives, and we need to say and do something about it. So as a result, 10,323 members of our community wrote comments basically expressing these concerns. And so when we wrote the editorial, what we were saying is that it's not about whether or not someone supports or doesn't support the buildup. The issue here is that there are a lot of very serious concerns our community has about the buildup that to this day have not been addressed. And to simply say that it's just going to be good for the economy or it's just going to provide jobs, you're kind of limiting the scope of the dialogue that really needs to happen, which is what are our solutions, right? And even in the issue of the economy and jobs, well, if it's going to boost our economy, how specifically, right? How much is it really going to cost our government to upgrade our infrastructure, our social services? What kinds of jobs are being offered to people? What are the wages for those jobs? Do those jobs come with benefits? Are they permanent jobs? So it's really not just kind of spoon feeding our community these, that don't worry, everything's going to be fine. You're going to have jobs. We need to question that.
And we already know in the initial buildup, actually, these are temporary jobs, because once the building is built, and you may be able to transfer to another building site, but once it's done, then do you again now move into the inside of the building now, and then at what capacity? Right? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, well, just kind of on that note, a lot of people, when we do talk about this issue, will say, well, if not the buildup, then what's our solution? And the one thing to remind our community is that the buildup was never Guam's solution to a huge economic problem. The buildup was assigned to our community. Our community didn't ask the Department of Defense to bring the Marines here. Our community was told, make room, right? Because of our status as an unincorporated territory, we didn't have a say about whether or not the Marines would come here. So it's not a solution to our economic problems.
You know, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because early on in the buildup, and we spoke about this before coming on, is that back in 2006, absolutely, when we heard about this, when the negotiations were still happening between the U.S. State Department and the Japanese Diet, we heard, of course, 40,000 new people come in here, up to 15,000 employees, $10 billion, $15 billion we were trying to find out how much of that is coming here. So I put together really about in a day, you know, our infrastructure need, which was identified 2.5 or 2.4 billion dollars. As we see right now, it's short about $2 billion actually for the local infrastructure. But you're right on that, because I've been to, when I was serving the legislature, early on in the talk about the buildup, there was some concern about the military move here and the effect it might have on the tourism, because at the time the folks at GVB were saying, you know, that's one of the reasons why the Japanese in Okinawa weren't getting as much of their Japanese tourists, because it was a it was a military community. And so you're going to have the same thing here. So it was a concern to the tourism industry at the time, that they didn't know how that was going to mesh with the you know, our base of tourism. And
this is one of the reasons that we wrote this was simply because there's been a lot of talk lately that the criticisms, the discussion, the questions, the fact that people want to know more, the fact that people don't trust empty rhetoric anymore, that somehow that's a bad thing. That people wanting to know more and demanding evidence that there's some sort of something concrete before they say, I want this, or I think this is good. And that people are saying that this is bad, that this is unpatriotic, that this is ungrateful, it's all these things. And, you know, for us, it's not.
I mean, I think it shows. I think it definitely shows a mature community, a community that has grown up now and says, well, wait, hold it, because now, you know, if you want to come to my house, if either one of you want to move in my house, I say, okay, do I have enough space? And if you do, well, yeah, we're going to be an inconvenience, but maybe you're going to have to build the extra room, and maybe you're going to have to fund it.
Yeah, it's.
Or even this idea that to challenge things means that you are hating, right? So a lot of commentary has come out lately that, well, we shouldn't be so hateful in our language, and really none of the language, you know, none of these questions are full of hate. They're full of concern. They're full of. We want to make sure that our lives, the lives of our children, are not going to be so drastically affected that, for example, we won't be able to afford to live here anymore. And so, I mean, even when people say, like, that it is an important question, well, what is an economic solution for Guam? Well, why don't we try as a community to figure out other jobs, not just construction jobs, but jobs that people can progress in and that are not just temporary,
and you can sustain,
and that we can sustain. Why don't we begin to look into agriculture? If people, you know, a lot of times people will say, well, you know, people from Guam won't go and work in the farm, but what's the difference between working in construction and working in a farm? It's just as strenuous. It's in the sun, but we're providing food for our community, which is really important.
We're going to take a break right now, but you can chime into this conversation by dialing 632-8255 or 632-TALK to speak to either Dr. Bevacua or Vicky. We'll be right back.